Tonight on Capitol Hill, a confirmation hearing meant to focus on leadership and accountability took a sharp turn into questions about loyalty, intimidation, and the future direction of the United States military.
Thank you. You're a very understanding chairman. I like that. Ms. Hegseth, you've written, and it's quote, "Oh yeah, and fire any general who hasn't carried water for Obama and Biden's extra constitution and agenda-driven transformation for our military. Clean house and start over." It's come to my attention that current serving military personnel have received emails threatening them with being fired for supporting the current DoD policies. One mail that was sent to a military officer with the subject line, "Clean house," reminiscent of your specific comment, states, and I quote, "With the incoming administration looking to remove disloyal, corrupt, traitorous, liberal officers such as yourself, we will certainly be putting your name into the list of those personnel to be removed. We know you support the woke DEI policies and will ensure you never again influence anyone in the future. You and the redacted spouse's name will be lucky if you're able to collect your military requirement," end quote. Now, I want to remind everyone that these policies that are being referred to date back decades, to the 1940s and 50s, with respect to racial discrimination particularly, and administrations of both parties, including the Trump administration and their first party, caused those policies to be enforced. Mr. Hegseth, are you aware of these emails being sent to officers?
Senator, you mentioned the word accountability, which is something we have not had for the last 4 years.
Are you aware of these messages being sent to officers?
Certainly, I'm not aware of that. It's not one of my efforts, but there's been no accountability for the disaster of the withdrawal in Afghanistan, and that's precisely why we're here today.
Excuse me.
Is that leadership has been unwilling to take accountability. It's the time to restore that to our most senior ranks.
You've written publicly that DI policy is a distraction and have military personnel walking on eggshells. Do you believe that emails like that are essentially threatening both a serving officer and a spouse and claiming that they'll lose their pension will have a distraction and detract from the lethality?
Senator, you mentioned the 40s and 50s, and you're precisely right. The military was a forerunner in courageous racial integration in ways no other institutions were willing to do. I served with men and women of all backgrounds because of the courage of people decades and decades ago. Incredibly important. However, the DEI policies of today are not the same as what happened back then. They're dividing troops inside formations, causing commanders to walk on eggshells, not putting meritocracy first. That's the indictment that's made by those serving right now.
Excuse me.
And why we're having this conversation.
All of your public comments don't talk about meritocracy. They talk about liberal democratic efforts that are destroying the military, that those people are our enemies. That's not meritocracy. That's a political view. And your goal, as I see emerging, is to politicize the military in favor of your particular positions, which you've outlined extensively, which would be the worst blow to the professionalism of the United States military and would undercut readiness, undercut retention, because I can see officers receiving these emails beginning to wonder very seriously if they should continue. Let me change subject for a moment here. You've been instrumental in securing pardons for several convicted war criminals. In at least 2 of these cases, the military personnel who served in combat with these convicted service members were not supportive of the pardons. They did their duty as soldiers to report war crimes. Your definition of lethality seems to embrace those people who do commit war crimes, rather than those who stand up and say, this is not right. So what's the response to your service members who personally witnessed these and courageously reported them to their superiors?
Senator, as someone who's led men in combat directly and had to make very difficult decisions, I've thought very deeply about the balance between legality and lethality, ensuring that the men and women on the front lines have the opportunity to destroy with and close the enemy, and that lawyers aren't the ones getting in the way. I'm not talking about disavowing the laws of war or the Geneva Conventions or the Uniform Code of Military Justice. Sir, I'm talking about restrictive rules of engagement that these men and women behind me understand they've lived with on the battlefield, which has made it more difficult to defeat our enemies. In many of the cases you're talking about in particular, sir, there was evidence withheld, there was prosecutorial misconduct, and as someone who looks case by case and defaults to the warfighter, to the men and women with dust on their boots, not the second guessers in air-conditioned offices in Washington, D.C.
Excuse me.
I look case by case and was proud to work with President Trump to understand those cases and ensure that our warriors are always looked out for.
Those cases were adjudicated by who? People in Washington or fellow non-commissioned officers who had also served, sacrificed, and believed in the ethic of the military? Who were the court martial?
Senator, in multiple cases, they were actually acquitted, but
some
charges
cases,
lingered.
yes,
Regardless of where those convening authorities were, yes, sir.
Some were, but others were convicted, and you asked for pardon. That's the only reason you asked for pardon, because they were convicted. But the other factor, too, is you've already disparaged in writing the Geneva Convention, the rules of law, all of these things. How will you be able to effectively lead a military in which one of the principal elements is discipline, respect for lawful authority? You have made statements to your platoon after being briefed by a JAG officer. Well, by the way, would you explain what a JAG-off is?
I don't think I need to, sir,
Why not?
because the men and women watching understand.
Well, perhaps some of my colleagues don't understand.
It would be a JAG officer who puts his or her own priorities in front of the warfighters. Their promotions, their medals, in front of having the backs of those who are making the tough calls on the front lines.
Thank you, Senator Reed.
Interesting.
Thank you, Senator
Thank you
Reed.
very much.
Senator Fisher.
Thank you, Mr.
During a tense exchange at his Senate hearing, Defense Secretary nominee Pete Hegseth was confronted over past comments in which he called for firing generals who, in his words, carried water for the Obama and Biden administrations and supported what he described as an extra-constitutional and agenda-driven transformation of the military. The phrase clean house and start over has since resurfaced in a troubling way, tied to reported emails sent to currently serving military officers. According to lawmakers at the hearing, at least one email allegedly sent to a military officer carried the subject line clean house. The message reportedly accused the officer of being disloyal, corrupt, and supportive of so-called woke Department of Defense policies. It went further, warning that the officer and even their spouse could face consequences, including removal and loss of retirement benefits. That is not just heated rhetoric. When asked directly whether he was aware of such emails being sent to officers, Pete Hegseth responded that he was not aware of them. He pivoted to the word accountability, suggesting that the military had lacked it over the past 4 years. But the core question hanging over the hearing was not about policy disagreements. It was about whether political language at the top can filter down into real-world pressure campaigns inside the armed forces. This is where viewers need context. The United States military operates on a foundational principle of civilian control combined with strict nonpartisanship within its ranks. Service members swear an oath not to a president, not to a political party, but to the Constitution. That distinction is critical. Policies related to racial integration, equal opportunity, and non-discrimination date back to the 1940s and 1950s, long before current culture wars. These policies were strengthened under presidents from both parties, including the first Trump administration. So when terms like woke military or clean house are used, they often collapse decades of bipartisan policy into a single political talking point that can blur the line between legitimate oversight and perceived ideological purges. If officers begin to fear being labeled disloyal for implementing standing Department of Defense policy, morale and readiness could suffer. And readiness, not rhetoric, is what ultimately determines military effectiveness. Let us also examine the broader theme of accountability that was raised. Accountability in the military traditionally means performance-based evaluations, adherence to lawful orders, and conduct consistent with military law. It does not mean alignment with a particular administration's political framing. If political loyalty becomes a litmus test, it fundamentally changes the character of the institution.